Hello, everyone. I'm Allison Evans with Allison Evans Coaching, and I am here with the delectable Michaela Kenkel.
Thank you. Welcome.
Michaela is my friend, and she has written a beautiful cookbook. It's called Savor It, and it is just one of my favorite things. I love many things about it. I love that Michaela wrote it. I love knowing the story of this cookbook. And I really wanted all of you to know about it too, to meet Michaela, to hear the story of this gorgeous cookbook, and to talk about it and Michaela's journey and talk about some of the recipes too. So, welcome, Michaela.
Thank you. I'm so happy. I'm so excited to do this. We've talked about this for a little bit, and yeah, I've just been buzzing all day long. I can't wait.
Good, good. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this too because you're right. We've been talking about this. You and I have been talking about it for a while. And in fact, the first time I ever met you was on a Zoom screen like this. We were talking about coaching together, and I
Mhm.
asked what brought you to coaching, and you said, "Well, I want to write a cookbook." So, um, so can you tell us why did you want to write a cookbook?
I think as we get older, like those bucket list items just become more in your face. And, it was always something that I had thought about over the years. And I've hosted a food blog for about the last 15 years. And a lot of people are like, well, what do you need a cookbook for? You have this avenue to share these recipes. And I just wanted something, tangible that I could hold in my hands and say, look what I did, and it would be a story of our family's recipes that I grew up with, and even my mom grew up with, and my dad, and now my kids and my grandkids all growing up with these recipes, and someday knowing that they'll have it at their fingertips when I'm no longer here. It was just a labor of love for sure.
Mm, I love that. I love the awareness that food is part of our culture. I mean, you didn't say that exactly, but you talked about, you've been talking about the generations, the people who prepared food before you, who fed you, and the people you're feeding and the people that they will feed. It's food and feeding our families can be kind of a minefield, with nutrition information and how do you get people off their phones and how do you get people, young people especially, to come to the table and be together. And so it seems really fitting to me that though you started with a food blog, which has been so successful, and remind us of the name of your food blog.
It's called An Affair from the Heart.
Okay, an affair from the heart. Thank you. So it's really fitting that, you know, food, which is so intimate, and your food culture is something that was passed down to you from your, the people in your family, and you're passing it down to the people in your family. It seems really fitting that you make something. That they can touch. So tell us about the dedication page. I think this is a really beautiful touch.
Oh, well, thank you. So, I have always been someone who was really big on handwriting. Like, I just handwritten recipes in particular. I have so many from my grandmas and my mom and my aunts, you name it. And the ones that are in their handwriting, no matter if they're in this book or they're online, those cards just mean so much to me to pull them out and to know that they were in their hands at one time and in their handwriting. And so there are touches of my handwriting. The title of the book is in my handwriting. All of the different category pages are in my handwriting. And on the dedication page, this book is dedicated to both of my grandmothers and my mom. On this page is like a wallpaper, and my daughter Josie, who's a graphic design, she just actually just graduated from the University of Nebraska Lincoln, and she is a graphic designer. She designed all the everything with the book, and she actually had the idea to take three of those recipe cards, one from each grandma and one from my mom, and she worked her magic and turned it into wallpaper that is on the opposite side of the dedication page. So my grandmas and my mom are literally right inside this book too.
Yeah. And
Which
your
I love.
daughter. And your
And my
daughter
daughter.
did it. Oh,
Yes,
it's
yes.
just so, so meaningful. So tell us about your mom and your grandmothers, and um, who and what inspired your interest in cooking.
So, I've thought about this a lot, and I feel like a lot of things in life, I feel like there wasn't like one like key thing that was like, oh my gosh, I love to cook, you know? It was
Mhm.
just kind of the thing that we did. And but looking back on it now, I had a stay-at-home mom, and that feeling of walking in the house and knowing my mom made peanut butter cookies, or or you could smell what was for dinner and you knew it was your favorite, and just that welcoming sense of coming home. Um, you know, that's what I did for my family, and I love that they can walk in a door and know what I made for Sunday night dinner because they smell it and they're like, "Oh my gosh, you made whatever." And I feel like it was just kind of the feeding of your family, but it was such an act of love that I didn't even know that I was really enjoying. And it wasn't until one day that a friend of mine told me, you should start a food blog and put these, some of these recipes on there. And I was like, what's a food blog? And that, I really kind of started paying attention to what my favorite things were instead of them just being a part of our lives, something that happened every day that gathered us around a table every single day.
Well, you mentioned Sunday night dinners and gathering around a table every single day. And there may be people listening to this who say, what? You have grown children who still come for Sunday night dinners? And I know you have grandchildren as well. And it sounds like, I mean, one of the things that makes your story and this cookbook so compelling to me is knowing, like, I know something about your family, and I know that you have four beautiful grown children and some grandchildren as well, more coming, and they still want to come over. They still want to eat your food. They still feel welcomed when they walk in the door and they smell your food. So I just think that's such a triumph, that you created something so meaningful and that so many of us really long for. It's that welcoming table, a table that is compelling and delicious, where people feel nourished. So I just want to say, well done.
Oh, well, thank you. That's a huge compliment. It was, my husband and I, when we were in our early 20s and we were talking about getting married and, what we wanted our life to look like. And both of us grew up where, every night we were around the table with our families, and in the time that we got married, those distractions weren't there that we people have now with, cell phones and all of that kind of stuff. But, we both just kind of made like a pact with each other that this was going to be something that we were going to do every day. And, it wasn't always easy when it came to sporting events. And, our kids, we had four kids that were busy all the time, and we were always running, and it would have been easy just to eat in the car. And, we just, no matter who was here, dinner was here and we were around the table, and we have always had a no devices rule at the table. As soon as devices came into the picture, it was a time for our family to connect and see how everyone's day was. And I learned from my mom is very good at cooking just what everybody needs, and my mother-in-law was always the one that cooked for a crowd. So I learned from her, that there was always enough. There was always like, so if somebody stopped by, well, come on in, and join us. There's just, I've always loved the idea of, you know cooking just a little extra just in case somebody stopped by, or sending it home with one of them. So we call them mom TV dinners, so they have something for lunch the next day.
Oh my goodness.
So
Well,
it worked out. It was, it's definitely something that I'm proud of.
well, you should be. And I think this is a good time to, talk about the food because because actually I like the food that I make. However, I've noticed that I have one child who just has never really liked my food. And I didn't think that was possible until I had a child who didn't like it. And I think in some ways that's bad. It's just bad luck, luck of the draw. Sometimes, sometimes that happens. But I've noticed, Michaela, that your recipes are delicious and very accessible, like in the sense that they're not overly complicated. They have ingredients that are easy to find in the grocery store. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I just I'm not a trained cook. I'm not a chef by any means. I'm self-taught, and taught by, like I said, my mothers and my grandmothers. And I cook the way that I learned, and I'm a firm believer in a well-stocked pantry. I think that it can save you when nights are really, really busy. And like I said, with having the big family that I have, things
Mm.
were busy and I was constantly on the go, and like most people are. And just because it only has five ingredients doesn't mean it doesn't have to, that it can't taste good. And I just felt like if I could make it in, 30 minutes with just a few things that I always stocked, it was easier to get us around the table and not have the cop out of, well, let's just run through the drive through, or let's just order pizza. And not to say that that we never did, because, that would make me a liar. But, it was easy to throw those things together and throw them in the crock pot, and it was just ready to go. So I just feel like it just makes life so much easier when, I look at a recipe that has, a bazillion ingredients on it, and I'm like, not for me, you know? So, so yeah, yeah.
Yes. I recently had the experience of just looking through an old cookbook. It was actually a baking book, and I was very excited by a particular recipe, and so I dove into making it, and then it just went on and on with all of these different preparations. Like over here, you have this going on, and then while that's cooking, you got to prepare this, and it was such a production, and so I love the relatively simple, straightforward way that your recipes are put together.
Oh, thank you.
And I love too, something that you mentioned a minute ago was about feeding a crowd. And so I know, because I've read your book cover to cover, that one of your inspirations for the style of the book was the community cookbook, like the kind you find in churches. So can you say more about that inspiration?
Absolutely. So back in when I was in junior high and high school, I had a little cedar chest that was in my bedroom that my grandpa had actually he had built, and it sat in my room. And it had a few blankets or whatever in it, but I turned it into my hope chest. And for those that are really young, you might have to Google what a hope chest is. But in a nutshell, it were things that you collected that someday you hoped you would bring into your married life. And so I had some tea towels that my grandma had embroidered, and different things that were in there. And inside there was also a church cookbook that my maternal grandmother gave me, and it was from, I think, 1982, if I remember right. And it is, to this day, still my favorite cookbook, because I know when I open that book, if I'm going to make anything out of that cookbook, it turns out every single time. And because those women put their name on those recipes, and they were not going to, be like, did you taste that one? Because I don't even know why she put that in the cookbook. Like, you're not going to put your name on something that isn't like tried and true and tested in front of all, the local church ladies. So you just always knew that if they were going to put their name on it, it was going to be good. And that book is just like, it's just one of those books that I love. And it has everything in it. It's not just, here's a bunch of crock pot recipes, or here's a bunch of cookie recipes or chicken recipes. It's just a book full of everything, and that everything in there is good. And that's why I wanted to do with my book the same thing, because I even asked my readers on several occasions, what are your favorite kinds of cookbooks? And everybody said those types of cookbooks that had a little bit of everything. So that's where I went with it.
Yes, and I'm looking at the table of contents. There are so many categories. It's a little bit like a box of chocolates. Like, oh, I'm gonna have a toffee this time, so I'm gonna go to the toffee section, as it were. But there's appetizers, bread, breakfast, casseroles, pasta, sandwiches, salads and side dishes, soups, other mains. It's just a treasure trove.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
And may I say that it wasn't until my family moved to Nebraska that I ever saw a church cookbook. But oh boy, did I love it. I love looking at it because I knew those ladies,
Mm-hmm.
the ones I liked. I wanted to try their recipes, and it was so personal. It felt so intimate. Like, I get to have Juanita's orange rolls, and I've had them at, the church potluck. So I know it's great. And like,
Exactly.
and Lois's chicken divan. And so I was so happy to see chicken divan in here. It's one of it is, Michaela, so my mom passed away 5 years ago, but my brother and I divided up her recipe cards, and I got the chicken divan.
Oh.
So I have it in her handwriting, and so I understand. And so I really understand in my heart all of these inspirations that you take. There is something magical about, seeing a recipe card in someone's handwriting, the handwriting of someone that you love, whose handwriting is familiar. And when the recipe card is worn, it's like they touched this so many times.
Mm-hmm.
They spilled
Exactly.
so much on this, and there's
Exactly.
flour dust on it. It is so, so special. So chicken divan is one of my favorites, and I associate it with Lois Wilson from St. Mary's Church in Aurora, Nebraska. But my other favorite in this cookbook is stuffed cabbage rolls, which preceded our move to Nebraska. We were living somewhere else. Actually, it was Wichita, Kansas. And one night my parents had a dinner party, which they didn't very often. And that was the first time that I remember my mom making stuffed cabbage rolls. And of course, they put us to bed. Guests came, but I got up out of bed and I listened at the top of the stairs, and I tried to see through the banisters what was going on. And I smelled those cabbage rolls. And after that, that was always the food that my mom made for me when I would come home from college or the Navy or some place.
Oh,
So
I love that.
I know, so do I. So I was super happy to have both those recipes in Savor It. So I have favorites, and I know this is a book of favorites of yours, but do you have a favorite?
I do. It's pretty well known if you've like subscribed to my newsletter or anything, I pretty much talk about it all the time, but it's just so simple. But my mom's chicken noodle soup. It's my favorite. It's homemade chicken noodle soup. And it's funny because my older kids will make it and they're like, it just doesn't taste like yours. And it always tastes better when my mom makes it. It just always does. It's just one of those recipes. And it's tied to so many memories. I used to love, a snow day was always chicken noodle soup, and we would make the noodles from scratch. And both of those recipes are in the cookbook. And you didn't run to the store back then and buy them. You just made egg noodles, and it tastes so much better with just that little bit of extra. And I remember, if we're sharing crazy stories about growing up, I remember we used to go camping, and when I was really little, and my paternal grandmother, we were camping, and it was kind of like one of those cold, rainy days that really wasn't great for camping. But I remember going in my grandma's camper, and she had this little teeny tiny camper, and she had a rolling pin, and she was making egg noodles in her camper to make homemade chicken noodle soup that night because it was cold and we just needed to have soup. And I will, every time I make a homemade egg noodle, I think of my grandma and her rolling out that dough to make homemade noodles, just even in a camper, just to feed us something that would warm us. And there's just it, yeah, there's just so many memories of that. So
Oh
yeah,
my
it was
gosh.
always the thing that I always made in my play kitchen growing up. We would put water in the little pan. What are you making? Homemade chicken noodle soup. Oh, it needs more salt, or whatever, just it's just always been that. It's that recipe for me, for sure.
Oh, I love it. And boy, it just sounds like there are so many memories in that pot of soup.
There are.
Oh my gosh. And yeah, one of my sadnesses is my mother's mother was a really beautiful cook. They were Puerto Rican, and so she cooked in that style. And she made the most amazing rice and beans. She made a lot of amazing things. Um, Pork chops, something she called chicken fricassee. I know it's a thing, but I don't know if it's like
Yeah.
special like Puerto Rican version. She made so many wonderful, wonderful foods. And she was always feeding a crowd. She loved to feed a crowd. She loved to cook for days in giant pots and pans and just take over the kitchen. And I absolutely love that. And she never wrote the stuff down. She wrote
Oh,
nothing down. And so, and she also didn't teach my mom. My mom was intimidated to learn because she it she just felt like she couldn't measure up to her mother. But boy, do I wish someone had written it down, or that I had the gumption to pay attention and really watch what she was doing. So
yeah.
you are so, but I think if I tasted her rice and beans today, I would burst into happy tears.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
Yes, yes. So I know that my grandmother was happiest when she was feeding a crowd, when the grandkids would come over and unfold the card tables to make a giant table. Um, and when she was just standing in the kitchen, like serving plates and like welcoming people in the door. And that I used to tease her, like, why are you so happy? And she would say, I love feeding people. And so those were her happiest moments. And I'm curious, you have created this wonderful family culture, you know, with you and your husband and your 4 kids and your grandkids, is there maybe one memory from any point, no matter what age your kids were, any food related memory from your life with your husband and children that made you think we're onto something here. We're really doing it.
Well, actually, what comes to mind right now is you talking about putting all those tables together. I don't know about you, but I always hated to get stuck at the kid table. It was just like, it was just, such a big deal when you got to move to like the big people, the grown up table. And, but it's not always easy to do that. Like you don't always have the space to do that. And I remember the first holiday that I went to Brian's grandparents' house. And I mean, they had a humongous family and they had this ranch home, and you would go there for holidays. And the table started like when you walked in the door, like the side door into their little kitchen. Then there was a dining room, then there was a living room, and then there was like a porch that was kind of like off in the middle that was like a screened in porch, and it was all one big table that everybody was at. You may not be able to talk to the person like at the other end of it because it was gigantic, but she had everybody at one table. It wasn't like there was
Oh,
no kid table, and I was like, oh my gosh, you guys don't have the kid table, like this is so cool, like everybody was together. And that was always my thing. Like, so even like on Sundays, this past Sunday, we celebrated Father's Day, and there were 15 people here for dinner, and we were all at one big long table. It gets kind of tight, but I'm big into the big table. So when we were able to get everybody, when I started doing holidays at our house and have everybody at that big table, I felt it just felt so good. Like I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm doing what your grandma did. And it felt so welcoming when I was in her house and to be at that big, huge family table. And so
mm,
it's fun to do that now.
I love it. So I'm curious if any one of your kids has sort of got the cooking bug. Have you noticed?
It's interesting. I would say that all of them are all really good cooks, actually. And it's just, everybody always kind of pitched in, there was a lot of us. So everybody kind of had their pitch in thing. But I feel like my boys probably latched onto it a little bit earlier than the girls did. But now everybody they kind of have their own thing. So my youngest son I remember on Sundays, he called it bacon day on Sundays because we always did a big family breakfast on Sundays. And, he was like 3 years old making toast, just like
Oh,
whatever, you could pitch in on. So, yeah. So everybody, I think all of my kids are all really good cooks and are the main cooks in their own households.
that's amazing. It really speaks to the title of your book, Savor It. The feeling I'm getting from your stories is really savoring togetherness, savoring connection. It's not
Mhm.
just about the food. You gather around the food and you share the food. Um, but you savor life
Mhm.
together when
Yes.
when you cook and eat
Mhm.
together. And so I think it's a beautiful thing. And what you have created in your life for your family is a beautiful thing. And I'm so glad that you created this beautiful book
Thank
to
you.
inspire and feed us all.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your coaching. I mean, like you mentioned at the very beginning, I mean, we talked about this like, gosh, 3.5 years ago. And, it just became a reality within the last year. And, it really took, me coaching with you to get out of my head and, and to write this for the right reasons. I was worried, well, what if nobody likes it? It's just like, I think that's human nature. And, after you and I coaching and talking about it for so long, I just knew that I was going to write this, and it was going to be a book that my family could cherish when I was gone. And even if you weren't my family, you were just going to have a 300-page book of really good recipes that I'm proud to put my name on, that will turn out every time you make them. And they won't break the bank, and they won't, you won't have to go to some crazy, market somewhere to buy some crazy ingredient. They're all very, very doable recipes. And yeah, I hope everybody, can has the ability to gather those people around, and like you said, just savor life.
Yes. Wow, what a great place to end. There's just one last question. How do people buy this thing?
So you can go to anaffairfromtheheart.com, and I have a little link up at the top that says cookbook, and you just click right there and it gets shipped out the very next day or to your doorstep. So it's
Wow.
really, really easy. There's also an Amazon link on there if you prefer to shop via Amazon. So
All right.
yeah, right now. And then I am working on getting it in some local stores. I've got it in a couple places throughout Nebraska, and working on getting it into some more stores for the holiday, where you could just pop in and grab it whenever you decide you need a quick gift for someone. So
Oh, I love it. And my personal fantasy is that you'll, at some cooking store, you'll do a cooking demonstration, and then we can like eat the Savor It food from herself.
I would love that. It's in the works. It's in the works. So
Well,
yeah, you'll be my first invite.
okay, good. Well, I'm sure you'll let us all know. All right. Thank you
I
so
sure
much,
will.
Michaela.
Thanks, Allison. Thank
All
you. Mwah.